boom, out of pocket, so that you are able to make, to cater for other things.
Again, because when you say, I think that's what I'm asking.
Yes.
We need to be careful when we say this, because there's the assumption that on the side of the street, there are loaves of bread that are just hanging out there, and the students go pick up food and go. Somebody is paying for it. So when we say free, are we not talking about government-supported, funded programs?
Yes.
Okay. I just need to clarify.
No, I'm very clear. What you are explaining is very clear, because actually when we talk of free, I like calling it universal.
Yeah.
And what the president talked about, full support, that essentially means what we are talking about.
Okay.
It means that already the costs, the needs of the learning at those levels have already been taken care of through the public pass. That the equipment that you require to train as media technologists, that as engineers and all that, those equipments have been purchased or are being serviced or are being upgraded, graded by those funds. That the teachers or the lecturers, there's a budget that is already being used to pay for them. That all the teaching and learning materials required, including at the university level, research component, that is going to be there. But when now you want the learners to go in, I think this is where we had a challenge with the model, which which has metamorphosized now twice. When President Ruto took over, there was the model they were calling the differentiated funding model. Yes. That differentiated funding model, they said, there are certain courses which would require a little bit more, and this more should be paid for by the government. They identified them and they said, these ones will require that funding direct from the government, not placed on the head of any student.
Okay.
So in other words, you just budgeted for what does the University of Nairobi want? Jomo Kenyatta, Egerton, Moi,
So
Marcelo,
if I come in there, if I'm
that.
studying one of these courses, pick one. If I'm studying medicine,
Yes,
and there was an additional cost to that, away from B.Ed, for example.
Yes.
That the additional costs, students and stakeholders are saying that cost should not be borne by me, but it should be borne by government.
Yes, at that particular time, the government was supposed to shoulder that.
Okay.
And the analysis and the assessment done was that the universities were being starved of funds. In other words, education was not being prioritized even at that top level. Without that prioritization, then many of the universities, some almost declaring redundancies. You saw that. Yes. Moi and Egerton are examples. I think we can cite authoritatively, because that is on record, public record. So because the universities were not being funded as should have been, Ruto comes in and says, okay, now we want to have it as student-centered. You see the difference now that they were coming with. But when they say the student-centered, they loaded more of this funding on the student. And they said, okay, we'll now try to see for which course, how much does it require? Yeah. And this cost is supposed to be apportioned to the student. And the student, if you can't afford, first they say there's partial that will be a scholarship that the government will give you. And then there's a component which now you'll apply to Higher Education Loans Board. And once you apply, then you are able now to, if you get the loan, then you are able to meet that cost. And then they said there's a household contribution. So you see, they were changing that kind of component in financing. What that means, that is where, and when you mentioned the means testing instrument, it became apparent that they had not thought through this process very well. Why? In fact, those are some of the grounds which Kenyans contested so heavily, because they said this banding of students, you find first they started with 4 bands, band 1, 2, 3, 4. Then as they started implementing, they increased to band 5. And they're saying, based on the abilities of your families. And so that really left so many of the students. And some found themselves in bands which were not necessarily right. That would elevate them to be looked at as capable or able. But that is why even the courts, when they were dissecting this, they said, what happens when this means testing instrument does not accurately place someone? And so the brief period that they were given was simply to undertake public awareness and ensure that there's an appellate system within that. But all that, we were still saying you are not fixing the problem of financing university education.
So when it was happening before, I'm sorry.
Okay,
when it was happening before that, this boom that I've heard about was going on, and that people could, from the comments that we are seeing, people could go into the cafeteria, for example, at a university or at a training college and just hand in a meal card and eat.
The student would eat
3 meals a day, and that their beddings in your accommodation, whatever. Money was being put towards this function.
Yes.
So we are saying that over time, this seizure has taken place where the money, either not adequate or not at all, is being applied to these very same things. Okay.
True.
I just needed to clarify that, Dennis.
You see, when you talk about funding education, there is what was called as the boom at the time. There is help that also came into place and was
in the 90s.
In the 90s.
Yes.
Then all of a sudden, then the government decides we need to find a different way that, according to them, was superior and was student-centered.
Yes.
But even while at that, in this new model that is there, one asks the question, was there initial testing of this new model that would inform decision as to whether to implement it or improve on help that had been there since the 90s and needed fixing? Why do I ask that? Because based off information that you get today, and you're free to correct us if you're wrong, is that we're going back to help and fix what was not happening before and make it better. And with that then, Boaz, one asks the question, whilst we are going back, we're finding old students. Is this a solution? Or is this just another statement that is not backed by data, is not backed by advice, is not backed by any intention of doing it right? Because even help itself did not get it right.
Thank you. You are so spot on, because anything and everything we do in education, and indeed I know it should be even in other fields, should be backed by data, evidence-based. And before you introduce something new, first you must assess what is wrong with the existing framework. All these details, we had expected that they are the things that the Professor Munavu Commission, the Presidential Working Party. Of course, when I say Professor Munavu, I know the public understands that. So all these are the details that they needed to have addressed. Unfortunately, in our thinking, I had a disclaimer as a beginning, because that's why we challenged this. We felt that it was not done. We felt that was because there were several indicators. For instance, universities provided fee structures which were so huge, and the differences were so huge, and you're wondering what then informs them in terms of changing or charging this, to the extent that private universities in the country became cheaper than the public university. We say this is a problem. We say this is a problem because the public universities should be more accessible and affordable for these young ones. And so it appears the due diligence, the data collection, the analysis and the evidence that was done was not sufficient. And indeed, for me, the facts do not lie, and we can revisit history. Some history are so recent. The introduction of this model, which has pushed out so many of the children from the TVETs and the universities, its introduction was not well thought out, and it was rushed. Because you remember, this was born out of the second interim report by the Munavu Commission to brief the president. The first interim report placed CBC, the junior school, domicile them in lower primary.
Yeah.
The second interim report is the one that dealt with financing of higher education. And when that interim report was being unveiled, I think that was in July 2023,